Dear St. Anthony, I must admit that I struggle with the notion of saints, but having read your biography and having read what you have to say about this eternally mysterious relationship between God and human beings, there is no doubt in my mind that you reached a place, and that you continually reached for a place there in the center of your being, your soul, where you were only ever aware of the presence of God and how everything is held in that presence. And your cave in the eastern desert is about a 45-minute walk from here, so perhaps you went this way once or twice. The birds are still here, the birds whose ancestors apparently fed you and brought you bread. They still climb in the thermals in their slow circular motion without ever moving a feather, it would seem, as they measure or become the current. Is that the secret? The spring from which you must have drunk has dried up, and the monks who live down on the plain drive huge tankers, bringing water into the monastery you founded. The monastery couldn't exist now without those deliveries. Sometimes, if the wind is coming from the south, I can just about hear a bell tolling in the morning, and just about hear the bell for evening prayers. It's very faint, though, and it is as if I might have imagined it. And about 10 days ago, I heard a donkey braying, and again, if there is a slight wind, I can almost make out the whir of a generator, but I'm not sure. As you know, this is the land of silence. Christ said, "In my Father's house there are many rooms. This is the silent room." As you know, there are millions of others, and we ourselves can inhabit thousands. There are so many to choose from, and I'm quite sure the universe is full of countless billions of rooms teeming with life that I can't even imagine. Did you choose solitude? Or did God lead you into solitude? Or were you never truly alone without God as your guide, your light, your companion? I know that the Father of darkness kept you company, and you fought what you describe as demons, spiritual, physical manifestations born in darkness, hating light, which was sent to tear your being, to quite literally prevent you from praying and maintaining your relationship with God. And when I first arrived here, I was afraid, and I was angry that God should cast us into a world where we can become preyed upon by evil forces. How could a loving Father do this? Send his children out to play among forces that can tear them apart. But I've been here for several weeks now, and I realize it was my choice to come here, my choice of room, as it always is, as it was yours. I had been so confused, and in that confusion weakened to the point where I blamed everyone else for the state I was in. But now I understand that I chose that state. I chose those rooms, and I see now that every single action is a choice between the light and the dark. I had thought choices were merely about survival or even about pleasure, that pleasure was a justifiable choice all of its own. In fact, the pursuit of excitement, kicks, ease were all justifications for making choices. I had no idea that everything we touch, everything we are, and all that we choose to experience is actually a choice between dark and light. Nor did I understand how very sensitive we are to both those states. How with one there is an experience of increasing weightlessness, while the other is heavy. Why is pleasure heavy and joy light? Since you died, some of your words have been written down, and since then many men and women have taken to the wilderness, the quiet rooms, trying to follow your example. About 1600 years ago, these men and women were almost commonplace in the land where I grew up. They, like you, took to the caves and cliffs. They even built tiny cells out of reeds, and there are some utterly exquisite round stone cells, more like hives, sitting on a rocky outcrop on the west coast of Ireland, there with the kittiwakes and the storm petrels inhaling the wind. But there are hardly any of us left now, hardly any in the world. Perhaps no more than 500 souls on the whole planet living in these rooms, sleeping on stones and living on bread and dust. In my country, it is actually against the law to live that way. If you do, you're called a vagrant. And if I were to erect a small cell on Dartmoor or inhabit a fissure in the Torridon Rocks, even in the far reaches of the Gannet Kingdom of St Kilda, or as close to the sky as I could find on Scalt Head in North Norfolk, I would be moved on. The police would be called, and a pile of papers would be thrust into my hands, explaining that my actions were inappropriate and unlawful, and if I refused to go, I would be forcibly arrested. Maybe somewhere in the Canadian tundra I could manage it, but apart from that, I would need permission to live in the wilderness. I needed permission to come here. There is always the moon, of course. Good and evil does not exist up here on the moon, and the silence is complete. This is a world of silence, pregnant, waiting, enduring, and sometimes, I think, pleading for life. It has life in that it exists, and it has landscapes and moods, and I love the rooms between sunlight and dusk, when the rocks turn blue and the dust is almost silver. And sometimes I imagine it is a lake or a sea, and there are pink flamingos and fish just disturbing the surface, and yet still I crave life, idle conversation, notes of music in the distance, and that noise spun by a roomful of people enjoying themselves. Oh, and Christmas, snowmen and cakes. But here there is nothing, not even a breath of wind. And the food up here on the moon is passable enough, but as my thoughts drift, the chicken tastes exactly the same as the carrots, which taste exactly the same as the chocolate cake, so I can't really taste anything anymore. And the water is neither hot nor cold. I have 2 glasses, but they are the same size, so really I can't tell the difference between them. I have 2 sets of clothes. They too are identical. And sometimes I imagine the shadows on the mountains are areas of heather. And rising up between them are rowan and birches, and I have traced streams across the contours of the rocks, leading into the valleys where there are meadows stitched with flowers, and I can hear the sound of bees. And there is a woman coming towards me, and with each step, her eyes grow more intense, and she says, come and see what I have found. And we walk hand in hand along a small wooded path to a gate. And through the gate there is an orchard, and there are children playing, riding lions, and adults sleeping among peacocks. And suddenly, a man appears at the gate and asks, are you sure you want to come through? And he looks at us closely, and he goes on, if you do come through the gate, everything you need will be provided for you. You won't feel need anymore. As for love, there is no separation between love and hatred. It is just love. There is no desire to love, no desire to hate. There's no fear. There's just being. You can stay here as long as you want. Not that you'll be aware of time anymore. There is no good and evil here. So your struggle will be over. There are no decisions to make between the two, because beyond this gate, neither exists. Is it heaven? Asked the woman. No, it's not heaven. We have no need of heaven here. Heaven is another room. You go to heaven to be healed. We never get sick here. There is no such thing as pain. What about pleasure? I ask. No, there is joy. We are not weighed down with pleasure. What about rules? Asks the woman. There is only one rule, and if you break it, you have to leave. You can no longer stay here. Does anyone ever break it? The woman questions. There was a couple once, a long time ago, but they've gone now. And he looks at us again. It isn't a difficult decision. We smile and say goodbye. We walk away in silence, a little afraid, I think. Come on, says the woman. Let's run and skip and shout and scream and love and hate and dance and eat and win and lose and cry and laugh and grow old and die. Yes, let's do that, I say.